When we look through the stories in this class, these short stories, these poems, I'm not going to ask you too terribly much on, as far as discussion goes. I mean, you guys are supposed to have read the story, and so you know what it's about. It's pretty plain and simple. I don't need to explain the plot of the story if you read the story. We're not going to do that. We're going to go through here bit by bit, and I'm going to pull out, or try to pull out, specific, text that is important to getting more out of the story than from just a first reading. I'm not going to ask you guys, how does this make you feel? The story impact you personally? Because ultimately it differs from person to person, and there's more to talk about than that. The first thing that I want to look at, and I always choose this to be the first short story that we cover in this class, because it's 2.5, 3 pages long, and most people assume that there's really nothing to get from the story. There's nothing more than just what's simply there, and that's not true, or there's nothing to discuss. And like I said, that's not true at all. First of all, when you're reading a story, you need to know who's telling the story, who the narrator is. And in this case, who's the narrator? Yeah, the boy, the son. Is that a first person or third person point of view? First person, right? How long after this happened do you guys think that he wrote the story? I mean, did he write this the next day, next week, or maybe a few years from now? Or a few years from then? Huh? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that becomes apparent in the first sentence. The last time I saw my father was in Grand Central Station. Just from the language and the word choice, most people, if this happened a week, earlier, they wouldn't say the last time I saw my father was in Grand Central Station. That's the kind of language, kind of tone that someone, years removed from the situation, looking back and reflecting, would use. So we know that. We know who's writing the story. We know that he's removed from the story somewhat. And we know just from the opening sentence and through word choice that it's kind of a somber, it's not much of an uplifting story, it doesn't seem. We really found that out in the first paragraph. But even from the first sentence, the last time I saw my father was in Grand Central Station. Just like I said again, the language choice, the word usage, that sounds like a lyric from a sad country song or something. So, if you look in the middle of the first paragraph, when we see his father, we're introduced to what he is, what he will be, and giving us, this is a use of foreshadowing for events to come. So he says, as soon as I saw him, I felt he was my father, my flesh and blood, my future and my doom. Does that seem like a good thing or a bad thing? Yeah, it seems pretty bad. I mean, anytime they use the word doom and father together, that's probably going to be a pretty rough go. When he says my flesh and blood, the story was written in 1962. This has been throughout the history of, civilization, right? And even certainly still to this day, a lot of people still believe this, especially all over the world, but even in America, a lot of people still believe and hold value to blood and genes. So whoever your father was, that's going to, just, even if you've never met your father, you've got his blood, you've got his genes. That's going to determine something about what you will be in life. If your father was a no-good drunk, you're going to be a no-good drunk. No matter whether or not you had an awesome stepdad or, whatever. And you never met your father. You've got his blood, you've got his genes, and you will be like him. I mean, that's what kingdoms and monarchies are founded on, right? The belief that one bloodline is pure and superior than the others. So, there is a lot of that in here. And this is something that plays out, again, all throughout literature, all throughout, all throughout our actual history, not separate from fiction. So that's playing a part here. We'll see that plays a huge part in A Rose for Emily. And after that, after the flesh and blood part, he says, my future and my doom. What's he trying to tell us here? I mean, he's writing this story. We know, at least a couple of years, I imagine several years, removed from the situation. And he's talking about when he saw his father, he's looking back saying, I saw my father, I saw my future and my doom. That means that now that, as he's looking back on these events, seeing his father.
Is he seeing himself in his father?
Yeah, exactly. He sees his future. When he sees his father, now he's an older man now, he sees his future and his doom. Which is, ultimately that's the tragedy of this story, is that looking back now, he is, to a certain extent, we don't know to what extent, to a certain extent, he's just like his father. When he sees his father, he sees his future. He's writing from the future, right? He is now looking back. So he knows what he has become. And that future is his doom, right? So he's, again, more insight on that. This is actually my favorite sentence in the story. It says, I would have to plan my campaigns within his limitations. What does he, when you say someone is planning, what does it mean to plan a campaign? What are you hoping to do when you plan a campaign? Yeah, well, yeah, if you can say you're going to plan a campaign, that means you're trying to achieve something, right? You're trying to reach a goal. And he says, when he sees his father, he says he would have to plan his campaigns within his limitations, within his father's limitations. Ideally, romantically speaking, not romantically like love, but ideally, romantically, a father is supposed to be there to provide the son with what he didn't have, right? So the father supports the son and then gives him a boost to achieve the things that he himself could not achieve. Right? That's the idea from father, son, father, son. The son is supposed to, achieve what the father could not with support and with a boost from the father. And his father should, the father should be happy to see the son surpass him. So what we see here, though, is that that's not the case. Planning his goals within his father's limitations. So what he's saying is that whatever his father does, whatever his father did, the boy will never be able to surpass that. The boy will never be able to be anything better than what his father is. And he says this with confidence because he is removed from the situation. He's writing this several years down the road. Write down a few lines. He says, when the father speaks to him, he says, "Hi, boy. I'd like to take you up to my club, but it's in the 60s. And if you have to catch an early train, I guess we'd better get something to eat around here." The club. The club comes up a couple times, right? Do you think he has a club?
No.
I don't either. Now, again, this tells us what kind of man the father is. Because ultimately, and it's not direct, right? It's very passive. But whose fault is it that they can't go to the club? Is it really the dad's?
Well, the son could be kind of
Who has to catch a train? Yeah, exactly. I'd take you to my club, but you've got to catch a train. You don't have time to come to my club that's awesome, right? It's not direct, right? It's passive. You see that the father is manipulative and insecure about himself. I mean, that's really what the entire point of the story is. I mean, there's the boy becoming a man, and this story is about the loss of of boyhood and becoming a man. The tragedy is that he doesn't become his own man; he becomes a man just like his father, and it's also spurred on by the fact that his father is a failure and is so insecure that all he cares about is trying to impress his son, but not for his son's sake, for his own sake, to make himself feel better. And we'll ultimately see why that was pointless and stupid in the first place as well. But, okay, so the club, and the club comes up again. Comes up at the beginning and comes up at the very end. When he smells his father, he says it was a rich compound of whiskey, aftershave lotion, shoe polish, woolens, and we'll get to the rest in a second. What does that smell? What combination does that kind of conjure up? Not now, because we live in, what is this, 2011? But 1962. Whiskey, aftershave, woolens, shoe polish. A pimp? Well, kind of.